All right, everybody, welcome back to the #1 television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I am going to be reviewing Dune, House Atreides by Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson. This is book #1 in the prequel trilogy to the original Dune. Got the original Dune book up here. Well, there's a prequel trilogy that is written by Brian Herbert, Frank Herbert's son. Frank Herbert, the original author of Dune. Brian Herbert, his son, has taken over the mantle of the Dune universe, and along with Kevin J. Anderson, they have written about a dozen wonderful books in the Dune universe. And I do say wonderful because I like these books quite a lot. Now, this is book #1 in this trilogy. Came out in 1999. We've got the other two books in the trilogy, House Atreides. No, this is House Atreides. This is the one we're reviewing. House Harkonnen is book 2, and House Corrino is book 3. Together they make up a dynamite-looking trilogy, and I really like these books. Now, I understand, and I am aware that a lot of people are probably going to take exception to the fact that I like these Dune books that were not written by Frank Herbert. And I admit Frank Herbert's writing style is vastly different than the writing style of these guys. However, I like it and I accept it, and I think they're good stories that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have done. I also admit that Robert Jordan here, his writing style is a lot different than Brandon Sanderson. But yet Brandon Sanderson wrote books within the Robert Jordan universe, and I think it worked out very well. I think this works out well. I like these stories that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson have done, and we'll get into that. But before we do that, let's talk about, I have never met Brian Herbert. However, I consider Kevin J. Anderson a good friend, and he signed all of the books I own of his. And if you want to see an interview that I did with Kevin J. Anderson, it is on my YouTube channel. Just type in my name, Durfee, Kevin J. Anderson's name, and that YouTube video interview will come right up upon your YouTube screen. And it's a great interview because we talk a lot about the Dune universe and the Star Wars universe and some of the other universes that Kevin J. Anderson has created on his own. He's written books in the Dune universe. He's written books in the Star Wars universe. Very accomplished writer. Very cool dude. Let's talk about this book specifically now. And let's start with the cover itself. Like I said, this came out in 1999. The cover is dope. I like the cover quite a bit. I mean, it's not as fancy as these collector's edition Dune books I've got back here, but it's pretty good, and I like the illustration that Steve Ewell did. Just a cool overall thing. There's also some maps in here. We've got some maps of the planet Arrakis. Pretty cool. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of this book. Like I said, a prequel trilogy to the original Dune books, and this is book #1 in that prequel trilogy. Start out with excitement. I mean, this book starts out action adventure, Dune universe world building to the max right from the get-go. I think it's very, very, very well written and very, very, very fits very, very, very well into the Dune universe. And I really actually appreciate it a lot. I mean, this is the 3rd time I've read this. And I think I've read the original Dune book about 10 times, but I've read these a lot too. And I think it just expands the universe in a very kind of glorious way. We start with Elrond, the ruler of the universe. Now, he has got some evil plans. Well, not evil plans. He's trying his best, for a guy who he is, But anyway, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen is tasked. He's 40 years old. Now, so this takes place, like I said, prior to Dune. In fact, it takes place quite a bit prior to Dune. But not when I say quite a bit, I don't mean like 10,000 years before Dune, but within a generation of the original Dune. Anyway, this has got Paul Atreides. Paul Atreides is the main character in Dune. This is kind of about his father. That gives you an idea of how far in the past it takes place. Not that far. But anyway, Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, he's 40 years old in this book. He's newly been put in charge of Arrakis, otherwise known as Dune. And he gets tasked with a few things. Arrakis is, or Dune, the planet Dune / Arrakis, is the only place in the known universe that produces spice. Why is that? Okay. Spice gives people long health, is kind of worshipped as a religion. It's the only thing that makes for faster than light space travel. There's a lot of things that spice. It's the biggest and it's the main thing in the universe, economically, religiously, spiritually, everything. And it's only on this one planet. And now Baron Harkonnen is in charge of it. And Baron Harkonnen and his family, they're not the greatest people in the world, in the universe, in the Dune universe. Anyway, Arrakis has these worms, they have spice explosions, all these different things. And they've got Fremen, who are kind of like the native people to Arrakis, and it's like it's just a harsh environment. It's very hot, very sandy. There's a lot of science fiction characters, they hate sand. It gets everywhere. And especially in this book, and it's just not an easy job. Being the ruler of Arrakis, it's not easy. We've also got Pardot Kynes, whatever. He's a planetologist called by Elrond, the ruler of the universe, to study Arrakis. So we've got Baron Harkonnen, who is in charge of Arrakis. Pardot Kynes is in charge of studying Arrakis, studying the spice. Why no other planets have the spice? Why the Fremen are the Fremen, and why, and then through Kynes of viewpoint chapters, we get to kind of witness the cold brutality of these Fremen, who are the native sort of a people of Arrakis. And it's just kind of something that we didn't really get to see a whole lot of in our Dune, but we kind of get to expand on that here in these prequels. We also have Leto Atreides. As a young man, Paulos is his father, Helena is his mother, and his future son, of course, is going to be Paul, who's the main character in this. But Leto, as a young boy, he's gosh, how old is he? He's a young man. He's a young man in this. He is sent to the machine planet of Ix. Don't even know how to pronounce that, folks. Ix, to learn the ways of the world, or the ways of the universe. And he has lots of adventures there. Duncan Idaho is 8 years old, and he's on Gedi Prime. He's a slave. He's escaping kind of through the sewers of the planet, a gritty underbelly of the city, sort of in a Hunger Games-like chase with other slaves, which is kind of cool. So we get to learn all of our favorite characters from Dune. We really get to learn their origin story through this book and the 2 sequels. Just absolutely priceless. I loved every minute of Leto Atreides' journey, Duncan Idaho's journey in this like Hunger Games thing that he's kind of in. And then we've got Rabban, Rabban. He is the evil Harkonnen. He fails at a lot of stuff. He fails at sandworm hunting. He gets kind of pissed off, and then he decides that instead of hunting sandworms, he's just going to hunt people. People will be his game. And this is kind of where this Hunger Games sort of storyline kind of comes in between him and Duncan Idaho. There's the Bene Gesserit, of course, this Mother Superior who is scheming to breed the perfect woman to the perfect man, to give birth to the Kwisatz Haderach. I know I pronounce all of this stuff wrong. But the Kwisatz Haderach is the prophesied one. The prophesied one. Every book has a prophesied one. But and this is kind of the setup. This book and this trilogy is a perfect setup for all the cool stuff that happens in Dune. And there's a lot of cool stuff happening in this too. I mean, all of these plot lines that I've set up are kind of told through the viewpoint of each one of the characters that I've talked about. Like Baron Harkonnen gets his own viewpoint. The ruler of the universe, Elrond, gets his viewpoint. Pardot Kynes gets his viewpoint. Leto Atreides, Duncan Idaho, Raban, all the good guys, bad guys, and gray guys, they all get their own. It's kind of like Game of Thrones. It's set up really chapter by chapter. It's set up like Game of Thrones. You know which chapter is about who, and and then also we got these great chapter headings, which give a lot of backstory on Dune and the religions and the different planets and the different social structures and economic structures and all that kind of stuff, that it just expands on the universe in such a great way, and in such an entertaining way. Above and beyond everything else, these books are a lot easier to read than the original Dune by Frank Herbert. Now, the original Dune books by Frank Herbert are so beautifully written. The prose is just so gorgeous and eloquent and literary. Now, this is a little bit easier to read. It's kind of, I guess that's why I compare it to the Robert Jordan stuff. Is because the Robert Jordan writing style is a little more flowery and poetic than the Brandon Sanderson, but it still works together. It's the same comparison I'm making to the original Dune to these books. These are just flat out really good, dense, thick, epic space opera adventure novels. And I think that they're more well-paced than the original Dunes, but that's just me. The original Dune is my favorite science fiction novel of all time. So these do not top that by any stretch of the imagination. But these are super entertaining. And I think most people that read them are going to love them. So anyway, that is my review of Dune, House Atreides. I give it a solid 9.5 out of 10. Just absolute great science fiction, space opera, action, adventure novels set in one of the most gloriously expansive, mind-blowing universes ever created.